Hi, how is everyone doing today? Welcome to joining us to one of our live events here at Telemedica. I'm Tara. I am the lead Nexus provider, and we're talking all month about evidence to support your VA disability claims. And what we're talking about today specifically are rebuttal letters. And so I wanted to go a little bit into this. Previously, we had already talked about Nexus Letters and DBQ services. So if you've missed those broadcasts, please just go ahead and search back and you can review those from previous weeks. But today, rebuttal letters is what I want to touch a little bit more in detail about. So some people may have heard this term thrown around or this type of a document, but aren't sure exactly what it is. And so I want to go through today what a rebuttal letter is, how it can help your claim, and who qualifies for one, when to get one. So first, let's dive in with defining a rebuttal letter. So what we call a rebuttal letter is a response document to a denial of a VA disability claim. So it does contain a Nexus statement, but it's slightly different from a Nexus letter in the fact that it discusses specific points and argues against specific denial points, usually for misunderstandings or disagreements with the VA CMP examiner's opinion or the evidence that you've submitted, rather than focusing on a single connection, which is the Nexus letter primarily focuses on a connection of a single condition to service or to a secondary condition. So rebuttal letter is just slightly different, but it does contain some key elements of a nexus in a sense. So how does it help your claim? Well, it can prove the CMP examiner's either incorrect or it can lower the validity of their opinion. And it's backed, our rebuttal letters are backed by medical evidence. So everything we do is not just opinion-based, it's also backed by peer-reviewed medical evidence to support the connection that we're trying to work on. So when you get a denial, just in case somebody is not too familiar with this process, when you get a denial from the VA, you're presented with several choices in that denial letter. You can accept what the VA decision is. You can file a notice of disagreement or a nod with an explanation of why you feel the decision was incorrect, and the VA will review that decision and for the reasons that you explain it is incorrect and look for errors made on the decision-making part. You can file a higher level review, which is essentially a supervisor review. No new information can be added to that claim. It's just a supervisor would review that whole process to see if there was an error made. Benefit of that is that a lot of times you can get a phone call. You can elect to get a phone call to discuss with the rater. So discussing that with the decision maker is huge, in my opinion. The next option, you can file a supplemental claim with new information. This is one of those options where a rebuttal letter will come into play. Or you can file a VA Board of Appeals case for a judge or a panel of judges to determine if the condition is service connect or not. And this is also somewhere you can add some additional information into the claim. That's where a rebuttal letter really comes to play in those two situations, because in our experience, a medical provider is explaining why the decision rationale is incorrect and backing up with medical experience, literature, VA regulation, or practice-based information, why our original opinion holds value and holds greater weight than the CMP examiners. So I want to use this in an example of how how we would fight a denial rationale. So if you had filed a claim for migraine headaches secondary to tinnitus, and your denial came back and you got a denial rationale of that the CMP examiner said it was less likely than not that they're related, that tinnitus does not cause migraine headaches. And they could say that in many different ways. Sometimes it's in a short, sweet sentence. Sometimes it's in a very long paragraph of that. But the end point is causation. Is there a reason for denial? Well, causation is not a requirement for service connection. Aggravation is most of our claims, most VA disability claims are filed on the basis of aggravation, especially if they're secondary. And if it's filed on the basis of aggravation, then causation is not required. So that rationale is completely thrown out the window. And yes, can you argue that? Usually I would tell you, argue that in a higher level review, talk to a senior rater, explain how causation is not required, that it's aggravating, that your tinnitus is aggravating your migraine headaches for various reasons, whatever those specifically are for your condition or for your claim. And they will review the evidence. And if it's still denied, that denial letter will come, and we usually review that. And sometimes it provides a little bit more detailed information, and sometimes it just regurgitates the first denial. But what we do, and why a rebuttal letter can be helpful, is we then take that information, take the information from our Nexus letter, and explain it as to why it is valid. If that is the reason, we introduce additional research and information as needed. But we really explain that point to discredit that examiner's opinion. If it's a biased opinion, we've seen that recently. If it's just incorrect in its thinking, if the CMP examiner is not familiar with VA regulation, as in the causation versus aggravation argument, they're not considering the CMP examiner's opinion is not valid because they're not considering all ways of connecting this. They're only considering causation, which is not how the claim was filed. So that is the error that we are trying to correct and argue against. Sometimes it's done and easily done by you, and sometimes it needs a medical opinion, a medical provider to back that up. So that's why we provide those documents for our clients. So who qualifies? Prior Telemedica clients who've had documents completed by us, Nexus letters completed by us, qualify. New clients, people who have not had any services performed by Telemedica, if you received a denial for a service connection, say you were going for that migraine headache and you tried it on your own or with another group or whatever, and it was denied, it's not necessarily a rebuttal letter that you'd be getting from us. Rebuttal letters are purely our own thing within our realm. You would get a Nexus letter to where we would ensure that we argue the connection adequately and clearly, in addition to including the information from the denial letter. So almost like a combo document. You would kind of get sort of a rebuttal, the information from a rebuttal letter, because the provider would include that information as long as you provided us the denial letter. And you would get that clear, concise Nexus letter from us as well in that document if you're a new client. If you're a prior Telemedica client who are fighting a denial, we offer a reduced rate. Rebuttal letter is a reduced rate document that specifically argues that denial. And we focus in on referencing our previous document. So since we provided the document to begin with, we're not recreating that entire document. We are referencing that document, adding additional points to it, and arguing the contentions that the VA has with that claim. And so that's why it's a reduced amount. And that's why only Telemedica clients are qualified to purchase a medical rebuttal letter from us. But that doesn't mean that if you're new to us that we don't actually include the rebuttal information into your Nexus letter, because our providers very frequently will see on your e-benefits, if you had filed previously for that condition, our first question is, if your rebuttal letter is not there, if your denial letter is not uploaded, we would like you to upload that denial letter because we want to include that information. We want to make sure that we're covering all angles for your claim and not just the connection itself. But it's hard to provide a lot of that fight in language into a new document if you've never filed for the claim before, because we don't know what the VA is going to say. But having a prior denial, it does help us argue that claim. So when to get one. So most people, like I was saying, I recommend to do it for a supplemental case. So you get your denial, you file your higher level review to talk to a senior rater. If that doesn't work, for a supplemental claim, adding that new information into part of that claim is my recommendation on when to get one. To me, it's the most helpful if the denial rationale is related to incorrect thinking or opinions by the CMP examiner, like I was stating before. If for some reason the denial rationale is that you just don't have enough medical evidence, you don't have enough visits, you don't have enough visits with the doctor, they don't think it's a chronic condition, If there's a gap in care, if say you served 20 years ago and the first time you were seen for this condition is 20 years later, what needs to be proven in that case is that nothing post-service contributed to the development of that condition. And that's really hard to do. And that is why sometimes we can't provide a rebuttal letter if that's the denial reason. You can try to close that gap with other documents. I've heard people pulling up receipts from being able to prove that they were self-treating this condition, which does close that gap and does hold true to proving that the condition has been present for a long time. But the gaps in care, a medical opinion letter is not for you. It's not something that we can close that gap on because we're not providing objective medical evidence. Objective evidence is like medical records. We are taking what is there of the objective evidence and piecing it together into, is this at least as likely as not related to your service? And so an opinion letter cannot create new objective evidence in the past. And that's what often some of those denial letters are requesting. And it can be very tough because it's not that we don't believe that your condition is service related, so we can't prove it. And if we can't prove it, we can't meet the VA's criteria. So the VA does have a regulation that you have to have a connection that's clear. It can't be a speculation. That's another denial reason we see frequently is a connection based on sheer speculation is not sufficient to show service connection. So that's where people ask me about buddy statements or personal letters. Yeah, they can be helpful and I love them and I really think they have their place in rounding out your claim, but they are not going to be useful as a standalone document to connect 20 years without medical records. And that gap of care, it's just not going to be sufficient enough to show, especially if you've been treated for other conditions. So frequently we'll find people going to the doctor for their high blood pressure, their diabetes, their sleep apnea, but then they're trying to claim their orthopedic conditions direct to service, but have zero medical records of visits for it. Well, I can't argue against the VA's rationale of, well, if this was a chronic condition, then why didn't you mention it to your doctor when you're being seen for your diabetes, your high blood pressure, all of that? So it becomes a very difficult way to prove those gaps in care and without objective evidence. And so opinion letters, rebuttal letters, they may not be the most helpful in those particular situations. But very frequently, I see denial rationales of causation, and that's not really valid. Medical opinions from providers who are not familiar with the VA process, who don't understand the connections, who are not giving an opinion based on the possibility of the connection, but if there is a clear causation to it, or if it's something that's practicing medicine that is common, such as sleep apnea to PTSD. I see a lot of denials where they talk about the anatomy, where mental health conditions cannot cause don't cause a physical obstruction in your throat. And it's not really that black and white. It's not really that two-dimensional. There's a lot of literature that discusses the cascade of events that happen on a molecular level, that how these conditions are connected and how that physical obstruction happens, even though we're talking about a mental health condition. So there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of incorrect thinking when it comes to these connections out there. And those are where rebuttal letters really can shine and really can help show that connection. Let's see. So that's about all I have for the primary set of information and common questions I typically get revolving rebuttal letters. And so I can open it up to see if anybody has any specific question about rebuttal letters. I'll give that just a second. In the meantime, while I'm waiting to see if anyone has a question, how do I get started with Telemedica? We want to go over that. So you have a couple ways to reach out to us. You can email us, you can call us, and you can sign up through our website. Those are the three ways that really most people get in touch with us, starting with customer service if you're not sure as to which of the service lines would be best suited for your claim. Then I also want to cover one other quick thing in relation to reaching out to us. If you are a client of Telemedica and you are looking into possibly a rebuttal service, that's really going to be more of reaching out to customer service than it is actually signing up for a service, because we have a completely different process for that. We vet that in a completely different way to make sure that that it is something that we can assist you with prior to signing up. And so it's different than an appointment service. So you would be best for a rebuttal letter reaching out to customer service. That's one thing I wanted to make sure I was clear with. And so, like I said, hopefully you all learned a little bit. I know this was a short one this week, but rebuttal letters are a very specific niche product that I think can be very helpful when fighting your VA denials. Remember, we talked about Nexus letters, DBQs previously. This week we talked about rebuttal letters, and next week we're going to be talking a lot about the chart review process and how it could help your claim. So we provide a comprehensive chart review with services with Telemedica when people sign up for the Nexus team, and we'll be going into a lot of detail as to why a chart review can be helpful and how medical professionals can, it's not that we're finding connections, but we find the evidence for the connection that may be hidden. It may not be as obvious as you think in your medical records. So sometimes we're able to really see the way providers talk about your condition and correlate things within your conditions, within your documentation that may be not as obvious to you. And so there may be some medical connections that you might be leaving on the table. And so we want to kind of cover that next week. So join us for that. Otherwise, you can always drop some questions if you have any down in here, and we'll be sure to get back to you and respond by email to any of your questions if you have any on the replay of this, or if something comes later on. So thanks so much and have a great day.